What happens when a queen's allowance is not enough? How does a woman, often trapped in a gilded cage, find a way to make her own money, build her own power, or simply fight off soul-crushing boredom? Could a simple hobby, a secret passion, turn into a business that defies a king or changes an entire industry? We think of queens as symbols of state, draped in jewels and duties. But many were entrepreneurs. They were investors, dealers, farmers, and brand managers. Their palaces were not just homes, they were headquarters. Number 22 was the Queen of England, an aggressive antique dealer. Queen Mary, the wife of King George V, had a reputation for being stern and regal. She was, but she was also one of the most prolific and ruthless collectors of antiques in British history. Her collecting went far beyond a simple hobby. It was a systematic, lifelong campaign to acquire treasures for the royal collection, often using her status as a powerful tool of persuasion. She would visit the homes of Britain's aristocracy, and her visits were often dreaded. Before arriving, she would have done her research. She knew exactly what furniture, porcelain, or silver she wanted to see. During the visit, she would point to a specific item, a Chippendale chair or a piece of rare jade, and admire it intensely. She would say how wonderful it would look at one of the royal palaces. This put her hosts in an impossible position. To refuse the queen consort was a major social and political risk. Most of them buckled and offered the item as a gift. This practice became so well known that her habit was nicknamed Mary's Gimmies by a frustrated aristocracy. She was not just a passive recipient of these gifts, she was an active pursuer. On one occasion, she saw a set of ornate cabinet doors she wanted. The cabinet itself was too large to fit in her car, so she had her staff dismantle the piece on the spot, taking the doors and leaving the carcass behind. Her focus was on items with a royal connection, things she believed had been wrongly sold or given away from the royal collection in the past. In her mind, she was not taking things, she was reclaiming national heritage. She was restoring the collection to its former glory. This was her justification, but it operated like a business. Her product was the prestige of the royal collection. Her acquisition method was social pressure. Her payment was often a simple thank you note, or sometimes a much cheaper item given in exchange, a token gesture that made the transaction feel less one-sided. She kept meticulous inventories. Her knowledge was encyclopedic. She could spot a fake from a distance and knew the market value of almost anything. She also used dealers, but her preferred method was direct acquisition. It was cheaper and far more effective. Her efforts dramatically enriched the royal collection. She was responsible for bringing in countless masterpieces. But this side hustle walked a fine line between collecting and extortion. It was a business model based entirely on personal power and influence, something no ordinary dealer could ever replicate. Number 21. Did a queen's farm bankrupt a nation? Marie Antoinette is famous for her supposed let them eat cake quote. That is likely propaganda. But her model farm, the Hameau de la Reine, was very real. And it was a very real and very expensive business venture built in the Park of Versailles between 1783 and 1787. It was a fantasy village. It had a farmhouse, a dairy, a mill, and cottages with thatched roofs. But this was no ordinary farm. The buildings were designed by the best architects. The interiors were luxurious. The animals were treated like pets. The sheep were washed and decorated with ribbons. The queen did not just play at being a milkmaid here. She turned it into a commercial enterprise. The dairy produced milk, cream, butter, and cheese. The farm grew vegetables and fruits. These products were then sold, often at inflated prices, back to the kitchens of the royal court at Versailles. It was a closed economic loop. The court paid for the farm's construction and upkeep, and then the court paid again to buy its products. The queen and her friends would dress in simple, expensive muslin dresses and pretend to be farm girls, collecting eggs from chickens housed in pristine coops. This was more than just a farm. It was a brand. Marie Antoinette was creating a lifestyle. She was rejecting the stiff formality of the French court for a romanticized version of country life. This brand was incredibly influential. The fashion she wore at the Hameau, the simple white dresses, became the height of style. This, in turn, fueled the French textile industry. Her dressmaker, Rose Bertin, became a powerful figure, essentially the minister of fashion. The Queen's Farm was a content generation machine for this brand. It created an image, an aesthetic, that was copied by women all over Europe. The problem was the cost. The Hameau de Lorraine cost a fortune to build and maintain. The exact numbers are hard to pin down, but estimates suggest it cost millions of livres at a time when the French state was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. The income from selling cheese back to the court was a drop in the ocean compared to the expenses. So while it was a business in practice, it was a disastrous one financially. It became a symbol of the Queen's extravagance and her disconnect from the reality of her people, who were actually starving. Her side hustle, a business of branding and lifestyle, contributed to the public anger that would eventually lead to the French Revolution. Number 20, could an empress use art as a weapon? Catherine the Great of Russia was a prodigious art collector. But to call it a hobby is to miss the point entirely. And she used art collecting as a tool of statecraft, a business of cultural acquisition designed to put Russia on the map. When she came to power in 1762, Russia was considered a backward provincial nation by the great powers of Europe. Catherine was determined to change that perception. She decided that if Russia could not outfight Europe, it could outbuy it. And her strategy was not to buy individual paintings, it was to buy entire world-famous collections in one go. This was a corporate takeover strategy applied to the art world. In 1772, she acquired the Crozat collection from Paris. It contained masterpieces by Rembrandt, Rubens, and Van Dyck. The French public was horrified that such a national treasure was leaving the country. This was exactly the reaction Catherine wanted. She was making a statement. She was saying that Russia now had the money and the taste to compete with France. Her most famous acquisition was in 1779. She bought the art collection of the British Prime Minister Robert Walpole. The collection, housed at Houghton Hall, was one of the finest in England. The British Parliament debated buying it for the nation, but they hesitated. Catherine did not. She swooped in and bought the lot. Over 200 major works. The loss of the Walpole collection is still considered a cultural disaster in Britain. For Catherine, it was a massive public relations victory. She had agents all over Europe, from Paris to Amsterdam, hunting for collections to buy. She corresponded with philosophers like Diderot, who acted as her art advisors and agents. This was a sophisticated international business. The Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, which she founded, was her warehouse, her corporate headquarters. It was not just a museum, it was proof of Russia's entry into the club of civilized European nations. Each painting was an asset, and the entire collection was a portfolio designed to increase Russia's cultural capital. Her side hustle was not about personal enjoyment. It was a cold, calculated business of geopolitical branding. Number 19 was the Queen of England, a venture capitalist. Or Queen Elizabeth, I ruled England for over 44 years. During that time, the country grew from a second-rate power into a global force. A huge part of that transformation was funded by what we would now call venture capital. And the Queen herself was one of the key investors. She ran a side business investing in high-risk, high-reward expeditions. These were not state-funded naval operations in the modern sense. They were private, public partnerships. The most famous example is her investment in Sir Francis Drake's circumnavigation of the globe from 1577 to 1580. On the surface, it was a voyage of exploration. In reality, it was a mission of piracy aimed at plundering Spanish ships and colonies in the New World. It was incredibly risky. Drake's fleet of 5 ships was small. The chances of getting lost, wrecked, or captured by the Spanish were extremely high. But the potential rewards were astronomical. Elizabeth did not fund the entire expedition from the state treasury. Instead, she invested her own personal money, alongside a syndicate of other investors, including members of her court and wealthy merchants. She was a shareholder in the business of the voyage. When Drake returned in 1580 with his ship, the Golden Hind, its hold was filled with Spanish treasure. The cargo included tons of silver, gold, and jewels. The total value was estimated at around £600,000. This was more than the entire annual income of the English government. The return on investment was staggering. Estimates vary, but it was somewhere around 4,700%. The Queen's personal share of the profits was enormous. It was enough to pay off England's entire national debt and leave a massive surplus. She used this surplus to invest in other ventures, like the Levant Company, which traded with the Ottoman Empire, and later the East India Company. She was essentially running a diversified investment portfolio. Her business was funding pirates and explorers. She understood the principle of risk and reward. She used her personal wealth to fuel England's expansion, and in doing so, she became one of the most successful venture capitalists of her era. Number 18. Did Napoleon's wife try to build a sugar empire? Empress Josephine, Napoleon Bonaparte's first wife, is remembered for her style and her love of luxury. But she was also a serious and knowledgeable botanist. Her estate outside Paris, the Château de Malmaison, was not just a beautiful garden. It was a world-class botanical research center and a commercial enterprise. Josephine was born on the island of Martinique in the Caribbean, where her family owned a sugar plantation. She had a deep understanding of tropical plants and their economic potential. At Malmaison, she aimed to collect and grow every known plant in the world. She sponsored botanical expeditions. She used Napoleon's military and diplomatic network to acquire rare seeds and plants from across the globe. She imported kangaroos and black swans from Australia, making her menagerie a famous attraction. But her most serious business venture was focused on botany. She built vast heated greenhouses, which were technologically advanced for the time. She employed the best botanists and artists to catalog her collection. The resulting book, The Garden of Malmaison, was a scientific masterpiece. Her ultimate goal was commercial. She was particularly interested in plants that could have an economic impact on France. During the Napoleonic Wars, the British naval blockade cut off France from its colonial supplies, especially sugar from the West Indies. The price of sugar in Paris skyrocketed. Josephine saw a business opportunity. She tried to cultivate sugarcane in her greenhouses at Malmaison. The goal was to create a domestic source of sugar and break the British monopoly. The experiment was ultimately a failure. The French climate, even with heated greenhouses, was not suitable for large-scale sugarcane cultivation. The problem of domestic sugar production was eventually solved by the discovery of how to extract sugar from beets. But Josephine's efforts were a serious attempt at import substitution. She was using her passion for botany to address a major national economic and strategic problem. Her garden was a laboratory for agricultural innovation. Her side hustle was a business of botanical research and development driven by the pressures of war. Number 17, how did a Swedish queen turn philosophy into a business? Queen Christina of Sweden was one of the most unusual monarchs of the 17th century. She was highly intelligent, a classical scholar, and deeply interested in philosophy, science, and alchemy. She was also uninterested in the traditional roles of a queen, like getting married and producing an heir. She inherited the throne at age 6 in 1632. When she came of age, she decided to turn Stockholm into the Athens of the North. Her business was attracting intellectual capital. She spent a fortune inviting scholars, musicians, and philosophers from all over Europe to her court. Her most famous hire was the French philosopher René Descartes. She would have him come to her library at 5 a.m. in the middle of the harsh Swedish winter to discuss philosophy. The cold in the early hours were said to have contributed to the pneumonia that killed him in 1650. Christina's court was not just a salon, it was a think tank. She was investing in knowledge. She built a massive library, acquiring books and manuscripts from across Europe. She sponsored research, but this was an incredibly expensive business to run. The Swedish state, which was a major military power, was strained by her spending. Her counselors begged her to be more frugal. Her other more secret side hustle was alchemy. Like many rulers of her time, she was fascinated by the idea of the philosopher's stone, a mythical substance that could turn base metals into gold. She spent large sums on alchemists and their laboratories. This was, in essence, a high-risk research and development project. If it succeeded, it would solve all of her financial problems. If it failed, it was just more money down the drain. It failed. Ultimately, Christina's business model was unsustainable. She was spending more on culture and science than her country could afford. In 1654, she made a shocking decision. She abdicated the throne, converted to Catholicism, and moved to Rome. There, she continued her life as a patron of the arts and sciences, but on a smaller scale. Her reign in Sweden was a grand but failed experiment in creating a business of knowledge. She proved that a country could not be run like a university. Number 16 was a pharaoh's trade mission, just a vanity project. Hatshepsut was not a queen. She was a pharaoh. She ruled Egypt for over 2 decades in the 15th century BC and was one of the most successful pharaohs in history. One of her most famous achievements was a massive trade expedition to the land of Punt. Punt was a mysterious, wealthy kingdom likely located in modern-day Eritrea or Somalia. Egypt had traded with Punt for centuries, but Hatshepsut's mission was on a completely new scale. The expedition, which took place around 1493 BC, was a major business venture. She sent a fleet of 5 massive ships, each about 70 feet long, down the Red Sea. The mission was not one of conquest but of commerce. The Egyptians brought trade goods like weapons and jewelry. They returned with the treasures of Punt. The most valuable products were incense and myrrh, which were essential for Egyptian religious rituals. They were used as offerings to the gods in every temple in Egypt. Control of the incense trade was a matter of national and religious importance. But Hatshepsut's ships brought back much more than that. They returned with gold, ivory, ebony, and exotic animals. Most impressively, they brought back live myrrh trees, with their root balls carefully preserved. These were the first known successful attempt to transplant foreign trees on a large scale. She had them planted in the gardens of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. She documented the entire expedition in detail with carvings and hieroglyphs on the walls of this temple. The reliefs show the ships, the voyage, the people of Punt, and the goods being loaded. This was not just a record, it was a piece of corporate marketing. It was a way for Hatshepsut to legitimize her rule. As a female pharaoh, her position was sometimes precarious. The success of the Punt expedition was proof of her ability to bring prosperity and divine favor to Egypt. It was a business deal that doubled as a public relations campaign, cementing her legacy and demonstrating the wealth of her reign. Number 15, did a British queen run a covert publishing house? Queen Victoria's reign is associated with a strict public morality, but in her private life, she was a passionate artist and writer. She and her husband, Prince Albert, were both keen amateur artists. They took up etching in the 1840s and produced a series of charming domestic scenes. They depicted their children, their pets, and their life at Windsor and Balmoral. These etchings were never intended for public viewing. They were for their own private collection and to be given as gifts to close family and friends. However, in 1848, a journalist somehow obtained unauthorized copies of over 60 of the etchings. He planned to publish them and exhibit them publicly. Victoria and Albert were horrified. They saw it as a gross invasion of their privacy. They did something unprecedented for a reigning monarch. They sued the journalist. They took him to court to get an injunction to stop the publication. The court case, Prince Albert v. Strange, was a landmark legal event. It helped to establish the principle of breach of confidence and the right to privacy in English law. The royal couple won the case. The court ruled that the etchings were their private property and could not be published without their consent. This event, however, turned their private hobby into a public business. While they stopped the unauthorized publication, the court case generated huge public interest in the royal artworks. It created a market. In later years after Albert's death, Victoria did authorize the publication of some of her writings. Her Leaves from the Journal of Our Life in the Highlands, published in 1868, was a massive bestseller. It was a carefully curated glimpse into her private life. She was turning her personal brand into a commercial product. The earlier court case had taught her a valuable lesson. If you own the intellectual property, you can control how it is used. Her side hustle was not just creating art, it was learning to manage and monetize her own personal brand and intellectual property rights. Number 14, how did a Renaissance Marchioness build an art empire? Isabella d'Este Marchioness of Mantua was one of the leading figures of the Italian Renaissance in the late 15th and early 16th centuries. She was a major patron of the arts, but her approach was far more businesslike than that of a simple collector. She treated art as an asset class and her collection as a carefully managed portfolio. Her goal was to build a collection that would enhance her own prestige and the status of the small state of Mantua. Her main business was commissioning new works of art. She was a notoriously demanding client. She would write incredibly detailed contracts with artists, specifying the exact subject matter, the figures to be included, the dimensions, and the materials. She corresponded with the greatest artists of her day, including Leonardo da Vinci, Titian, and Perugino. She hounded them for years to get the painting she wanted. Her letters reveal a shrewd and persistent businesswoman. She would negotiate prices fiercely. She would play artists off against each other to get better deals. She was not just buying art, she was creating a brand. Her private study, her studiolo, was a curated space designed to impress visitors. Every painting was commissioned to fit a specific intellectual and allegorical program. It was a form of content marketing for her own intelligence and taste. Besides commissioning new works, she was also an active trader on the secondary art market. She used a network of agents to hunt for antiques and works by established masters. She was known to be ruthless in her pursuit of objects she wanted. She would use her political connections to pressure people into selling. When another famous collector rival died, she moved quickly to try to acquire his best pieces before anyone else. She understood that art had not just cultural value, but also monetary and political value. Her collection was a weapon in the complex world of Italian city-state politics. Her side hustle was running a combination of an art gallery, an investment fund, and a public relations agency. Number 13 was Queen Charlotte, a pioneer of scientific farming. Queen Charlotte, the wife of King George III of Great Britain, is often seen as a background figure. But she was a woman of serious intellectual interest, particularly in botany. She was also a shrewd manager of her own estates and finances. Her side hustle was the business of scientific agriculture and botany. She took a great interest in the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew. With the help of botanists like Sir Joseph Banks, she transformed Kew into a world-leading center for the study of plants. She sponsored plant hunting expeditions around the globe. The famous bird of paradise flower was named Strelitzia reginae in her honor. Kew was not just a pleasure garden. It was a laboratory. It was a place for acclimatizing and studying plants of economic importance from all over the British Empire. This had a direct commercial application, from new food sources to plants used for medicines and dyes. At her own residence, Frogmore House, near Windsor, she ran a model farm. This was a generation before Marie Antoinette's more famous Hameau. The Charlotte's farm was a serious agricultural enterprise. She was interested in new farming techniques and livestock breeding. She experimented with crop rotation and new types of machinery. She was particularly proud of her herd of merino sheep. These sheep, originally from Spain, were prized for their incredibly fine wool. The British wool industry was the foundation of the national economy, and improving the quality of wool was a major national priority. Charlotte was an active participant in this effort. She would manage the accounts of her farm herself. She sold the produce and the wool. This was not just a hobby, it was a profitable business. It was also a form of patriotic duty. By promoting scientific farming and botany, she was contributing to the wealth and security of the nation. She used her position to champion science and agriculture, turning her personal interests into a business with national implications. Number 12. How did a Danish queen use photography as a business? Queen Alexandrine of Denmark, wife of King Christian X, reigned during the first half of the 20th century. She was known for her quiet and reserved nature, but she had a passion that she turned into a small but significant side business: photography. In an era when photography was becoming more accessible, but was still a specialized skill, the queen became an accomplished photographer. She took her camera with her everywhere. She photographed her family, royal events, and the landscapes of Denmark. Her work was of a high professional standard. What made it a business was what she did with her photographs. She sold them. The proceeds from the sales went to charity. Her primary method of sale was turning her photographs into postcards. These postcards of the royal family were incredibly popular with the Danish public. It was a way for people to have a personal, informal image of the monarchs in their homes. This was a brilliant piece of public relations. It made the royal family seem more modern and accessible. But it was also a commercial transaction. She also sold signed prints of her work to raise funds. During World War I and later during World War II, her charitable activities were more important than ever. Her photography business was a way for her to contribute personally to these causes. It was a business model that leveraged her unique position. No one else could get such intimate pictures of the royal family. She had exclusive content. And by selling it for charity, she turned a personal hobby into a tool for philanthropy and for strengthening the bond between the monarchy and the people. It was a quiet, dignified side hustle that perfectly suited her personality and her times. Number 11. Did a Thai queen create a global fashion industry? Queen Sirikit of Thailand, wife of King Bhumibol Adulyadej, has been a major force in her country for over 70 years. One of her most significant achievements was the revival and modernization of the Thai silk industry. When she became queen in 1950, local silk weaving was a dying art. It was a craft practiced mainly by rural women, and the fabrics were not suitable for the international market. Queen Sirikit saw an opportunity to turn this traditional craft into a major national industry. Her approach was that of a CEO and a creative director. First, she conducted extensive research. She traveled all over Thailand, visiting villages and studying the different regional styles of weaving. She realized that the quality was inconsistent and the colors were not appealing to modern tastes. She set up a foundation, the Support Foundation, in 1976. This organization provided weavers with training, better equipment, and high-quality raw materials. It guaranteed that it would buy all the silk they could produce at a fair price. This took the risk away from the weavers and encouraged them to focus on quality. Next, she became the industry's chief marketer and brand ambassador. She began to wear clothes made from Thai silk on her official tours abroad with the king. She hired international designers like the French couturier Pierre Balmain to create modern, fashionable outfits for her using Thai silk. When the world saw the beautiful and stylish queen in her silk dresses, it created a huge demand for the fabric. She was essentially an influencer, using her own personal style to launch a product onto the global stage. The business was a huge success. Thai silk became a world-renowned luxury product. It created a sustainable source of income for thousands of rural families, particularly women. It preserved a vital part of Thai cultural heritage. Queen Sirikit's side hustle was not just about making money, it was about nation building. She took a cottage industry and, through systematic investment, quality control, and brilliant marketing, turned it into a global brand. Number 10, how did an English princess run her household like a corporation? Victoria, Princess Royal, was the eldest child of Queen Victoria. She was intelligent, well-educated, and ambitious. In 1858, she married Prince Frederick of Prussia, who would later become German emperor. As Crown Princess of Prussia, she found the Prussian court to be old-fashioned and inefficient. She decided to use her own household as a laboratory for modern management techniques. Her side hustle was the business of domestic science and management. She believed that a household, whether it was a palace or a simple cottage, should be run on rational scientific principles. She reorganized her own kitchens, introducing new technologies and a focus on hygiene and nutrition. She conducted time and motion studies to make the work of her staff more efficient. She drew up detailed budgets and kept meticulous accounts. She was essentially applying the principles of the Industrial Revolution to the domestic sphere. But her ambition went beyond her own home. She wanted to reform German society. She was a champion of education for women. She believed that if women were better educated in science, art, and management, they could improve the lives of their families and the nation as a whole. She sponsored schools for girls. She promoted the arts and crafts movement, encouraging the production of high-quality, well-designed household goods. She was also an active patron of industry and technology. She would visit factories and exhibitions, and she used her influence to promote German products abroad. She saw a direct link between the efficiency of a home, the education of women, and the economic strength of the nation. Her household was her prototype, her proof of concept. Her business was to be a change agent, using her own life and home as a model to drive the modernization of her adopted country. It was a side hustle of social and economic reform run from inside the palace walls. Number 9 was a Spanish journalist destined to become queen. Before she became Queen Letizia of Spain, she was Letizia Ortiz Rocasolano, a highly successful and respected journalist and news anchor. Her career was not a hobby or a minor pursuit. It was a serious profession that she had built over more than a decade. This makes her unique among modern European queens. Her pre-royal life was a business in itself. She earned a bachelor's degree in journalism and a master's degree in audiovisual journalism. She worked for newspapers, the Spanish Bureau of Bloomberg, and eventually for CNN+. She moved to television Española TVE, Spain's public television network, where she became a prominent news anchor. She reported from the front lines of major international events. She was in Washington, D.C., covering the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks. She reported from Iraq in the lead up to the 2003 invasion. This was a high-pressure competitive business. It required intelligence, toughness, and excellent communication skills. She was not just reading a teleprompter, she was an active journalist, researching stories and conducting interviews. She won a prestigious award for Best Spanish Journalist Under 30. Her career was on a steep upward trajectory. When she met and married the then Prince Felipe, she had to give up this career. Royal protocol demanded it. But the skills she learned in her business as a journalist did not disappear. They became her greatest assets as a member of the royal family. She's an excellent public speaker. She is poised and confident in front of cameras. She knows how to research a topic thoroughly before an official engagement. She understands the media landscape in a way that no other royal can. Her first career was the perfect training ground for her second. Her past business provided the human capital for her current role. Number 8, how did a Dutch queen become a financial genius? Queen Emma of the Netherlands was the wife of King William III. When he died in 1890, their daughter Wilhelmina was only 10 years old. Emma became regent of the Netherlands, ruling in her daughter's name for the next 8 years. When she took over, the Dutch monarchy was in a terrible state. The previous king had been extravagant and unpopular. The family's personal finances were a mess, and the reputation of the House of Orange was at an all-time low. Emma's side hustle was the business of crisis management and financial turnaround. She immediately set to work restoring both the finances and the image of the monarchy. She was a brilliant administrator and a shrewd financial manager. She went through the royal accounts with a fine-toothed comb. She cut unnecessary expenses. She sold off properties that were a drain on resources, but she did not just cut costs. She also invested wisely. She hired professional managers to oversee the vast royal estates, which included large areas of forest and agricultural land. She modernized their management, turning them from personal playgrounds into profitable enterprises. She diversified the family's investments, moving money into stocks and bonds. At the same time, she worked on the public relations side of the business. She understood that the monarchy's survival depended on the support of the people. She took the young Queen Wilhelmina on tours all over the country, reintroducing the Dutch people to their royal family. She presented a new image of the monarchy, dignified, hardworking, and fiscally responsible. By the time Wilhelmina came of age in 1898, Emma had performed a miracle. She had paid off the family's debts. She had put, the royal finances on, a solid footing, and she had restored the popularity and prestige of the Dutch monarchy. Her regency was a masterclass in corporate turnaround. She took a failing company and, through sound financial management and clever marketing, made it successful again. Number 7. Did an American actress save a principality? Grace Kelly was a Hollywood superstar. By the mid-1950s, she was one of the most famous and highest paid actresses in the world. She had won an Academy Award. Her career was at its peak. In 1956, she gave it all up to marry Prince Rainier III of Monaco. This was not just a fairy tale romance, it was also a strategic business decision for Monaco. At the time, the tiny principality was in trouble. Its traditional casino business was in decline. It was seen as a stuffy, old-fashioned place. It needed a new image, a new brand. Grace Kelly was that brand. Her marriage to the prince brought a level of glamour and global media attention that Monaco could never have bought. The wedding itself was a massive media event watched by millions around the world. It put Monaco back on the map. After becoming Princess Grace, her acting career was over, but she found a new side hustle that combined her artistic talents with her new role. She took up the art of pressed flowers. She would create intricate and beautiful collages from dried and pressed flowers. It started as a hobby, but she developed it into a serious artistic pursuit. She exhibited her work in Paris and other galleries. She designed a line of linens and other products for the American department store Springmaid, featuring her floral designs. The proceeds from these sales went to charity. Her flower art became a part of her new brand. It was elegant, artistic, and sophisticated, reflecting the new image of Monaco that she was helping to create. Her greatest business, of course, was being Princess of Monaco. She was the face of the principality's tourism and investment drive. Her earlier career in the business of Hollywood gave her the star power to perform this role perfectly. Number 6 was a British queen consort, a secret intellectual. Caroline of Ansbach, wife of King George II of Great Britain, was one of the most intelligent and politically influential queen consorts in British history. Her side hustle was running an intellectual salon and managing her own investment portfolio. She was a major patron of art, science, and philosophy, but she was no passive observer. She cultivated a circle of intellectuals that included the philosopher Leibniz and the composer Handel. She corresponded with the leading thinkers of the Enlightenment. Her court was a center of intellectual debate. She was particularly interested in the new developments in science and medicine. She was a vocal proponent of inoculation against smallpox, a controversial new procedure at the time. In 1721, she had her own children inoculated, a brave decision that helped to popularize the practice in England and save countless lives. This was a business of influence, using her platform to promote scientific progress, but she was also a shrewd financial operator. The kings of the Hanoverian dynasty often spent long periods in their native Hanover. During these absences, Caroline was sometimes appointed regent, officially ruling in her husband's place. But even when he was in the country, she held significant influence. She had her own income, and she managed it herself. She invested in the new financial instruments of the era, including government bonds and shares in trading companies. She followed the markets closely. She had a better head for finance than her husband. The king would often give her his money to invest for him. She built up a considerable personal fortune. This financial independence gave her a degree of power and autonomy that was unusual for a woman of her time. Her business was the management of both intellectual and financial capital. Number 5, how did an empress's hobby change Chinese art? Empress Dowager Cixi was the de facto ruler of China for nearly 50 years, from 1861 until her death in 1908. She was a powerful and controversial political figure, but she also had a significant side business as an artist. She was a prolific painter and calligrapher. In her later years, she would spend several hours each day practicing her art. She specialized in traditional subjects like flowers, birds, and landscapes. Her calligraphy was also of a high standard. But this was not just a private hobby. Her artworks became a tool of statecraft and a source of income. She would often give her paintings and calligraphy as gifts to foreign diplomats and important officials. This was a form of soft power. A personal gift from the Empress was a great honor and a way of building relationships. The paintings were often co-signed with the names of court artists, but her own contribution was significant. She also effectively sold her work. Officials who wanted to gain favor with her would commission paintings or calligraphy. They would pay handsomely for the privilege. The money often went towards her lavish lifestyle and projects like the rebuilding of the Summer Palace. The court artists who assisted her also benefited, as their association with the Empress raised their own status and the value of their work. Cixi's artistic production was enormous. Thousands of works attributed to her still exist. While the artistic quality is debated by experts, there is no doubt about the scale of the operation. She ran a de facto art studio within the Forbidden City. Her side hustle was a business that blurred the lines between art, diplomacy, and political patronage. It was a way for her to project an image of herself as a cultured and refined ruler, even as she navigated the treacherous politics of a declining dynasty. Number 4 was a Jordanian queen, a pioneer of social enterprise. Queen Rania of Jordan is known for her advocacy work in education, health, and youth empowerment. Her approach is not simply that of a traditional philanthropist who gives money to charity. She has structured her work like a series of social enterprises using business principles to achieve social goals. Her most significant initiative is the Jordan River Foundation, JRF, which she founded in 1995. The JRF runs 2 main programs, child safety and community empowerment. The community empowerment program in particular operates like a business. It aims to create sustainable economic opportunities for women and their families. One of the foundation's projects is a handicraft business. It works with women in local communities, training them in traditional crafts like embroidery and basket weaving. The JRF then helps them to design, produce, and market these products. The products are sold in showrooms in Jordan and online under the brand name Al Karma. The profits are reinvested back into the community, paying the women fair wages and funding other social programs. This is not a charity in the traditional sense. It is a social enterprise. It is a business with a social mission. Queen Rania has used her international platform to promote these products and build the brand. She has also used her business acumen to create other initiatives. The Queen Rania Foundation for Education and Development uses technology to improve access to education for children across the Arab world. It develops online learning platforms and creates digital educational content. Her side hustle is the business of modern strategic philanthropy. She acts as a venture philanthropist, investing in projects that have a measurable social impact and a path to financial sustainability. She is a CEO of a portfolio of nonprofits, using her brand and her skills to tackle some of the most difficult social challenges in her region. Number 3, did a Roman empress run the empire's biggest brick factory? Domitia Lucilla, the mother of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, was one of the wealthiest women in the Roman Empire in the 2nd century AD. Her family's wealth was based on a vast and highly profitable business, brick manufacturing. Roman construction depended on fired bricks. They were used for everything from aqueducts and public buildings to private homes. The demand was enormous. The family of Domitia Lucilla owned a number of large clay fields on the banks of the Tiber River near Rome. They operated massive factories or figlini that produced bricks and tiles on an industrial scale. This was a serious and complex business. It involved managing a large workforce, which included skilled craftsmen and slaves. It required sourcing and transporting fuel for the kilns. The finished bricks had to be stamped with the mark of the factory, a form of quality control and branding. These brick stamps have been a treasure trove for archaeologists, allowing them to trace the ownership of factories and date Roman buildings. When Domitia Lucilla inherited the business, she became one of the leading industrialists in the Roman world. She was not just a passive owner. Roman sources suggest that wealthy women often took an active role in managing their family businesses. She would have overseen the managers of the factories, tracked production, and managed the sales and distribution of her products. Her bricks were used in some of the most famous buildings in Rome, including the Colosseum and the Pantheon. When her son Marcus Aurelius became emperor, he inherited this vast industrial empire. The profits from this brick business contributed significantly to the emperor's personal wealth and the finances of the state. Domitia Lucilla's side hustle was heavy industry. She was the CEO of a construction materials conglomerate, a key player in the business of building the Roman Empire. Number two, how did a queen's love of books create a national treasure? Caroline of Ansbach appears on this list again, but for a different and equally important business. Beyond her financial and political activities, she was a passionate bibliophile. She was a serious collector of books and manuscripts, and she turned this passion into a project of national significance. Her side hustle was the business of library building. She established her own library at St. James's Palace. It was not just a random collection of books. She curated it carefully, with a focus on theology, history, and science. She employed her own librarian to manage the collection. Her most famous project was the construction of a new building called the Queen's Library in 1737. It was designed by the architect William Kent and was situated between St. James's Park and the palace. It was a beautiful building designed to be both a working library and a place for intellectual discussion. But her most lasting contribution was her role in the creation of what would become the British Library. In the 17th century, the old Royal Library had been given to the nation, but it was poorly housed and inaccessible. Caroline championed the idea of creating a new, properly funded national library. While the British Museum, which originally housed the library, was not founded until after her death, her advocacy and her example were crucial. She helped to create the intellectual climate where such a project was seen as a national necessity. She also used her library as a tool of cultural diplomacy. She would show it off to important visitors. She commissioned a series of marble busts of English kings and worthies to decorate it. She was creating a narrative about English history and intellectual achievement. Her business was not just collecting books for herself, it was building the infrastructure of national knowledge and creating a cultural institution that would last for centuries. Number one, could a Byzantine empress control the Silk Road? An Empress Theodora, the wife of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I in the 6th century, was one of the most powerful women in history. She rose from a humble background as an actress to become co-ruler of the empire. She was a shrewd politician and a brilliant strategist. Her greatest business achievement was her role in breaking the Persian monopoly on the silk trade. For centuries, silk was one of the most valuable commodities in the world. The secret of its production was carefully guarded by the Chinese. The silk traveled west along the Silk Road, passing through the Persian Empire. The Persians controlled the trade and charged exorbitant prices. The Byzantine Empire was one of the biggest customers, and the flow of gold to Persia to pay for silk was a major drain on the imperial treasury. Justinian and Theodora were determined to break this monopoly. They needed to find a way to produce silk themselves. According to the historian Procopius, around the year 552 AD, two monks arrived at the court in Constantinople. They had been missionaries in China or somewhere in Central Asia and had learned the secret of sericulture, the process of making silk. They claimed that they could bring the means of production to the Byzantine Empire. Theodora likely played a key role in this act of industrial espionage. The monks were sent back east, and they returned with silkworm eggs, hidden inside their hollow bamboo walking sticks. This was a high-risk operation. If they had been caught, they would have been executed. The eggs were successfully hatched in Constantinople. The Byzantines began to cultivate mulberry trees, the food of the silkworms. They established their own silk industry. The government under Theodora's influence maintained a strict monopoly on the production and sale of this new domestic silk. It was produced in imperial factories and sold for enormous profits. This single act transformed the Byzantine economy. It stopped the drain of gold to Persia. It created a new, hugely profitable state-run industry. Theodora's side hustle was the business of industrial espionage and strategic supply chain management. By stealing a single trade secret, she changed the balance of economic power between the great empires of her time.